Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. And I'm looking forward to this presentation talking about digital design and basically how we're working with it in Illustrator and how we can work with it basically in other products too. But I have a PowerPoint put together for you. I will get that started right now as we start the program. And like Olly was saying, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put those in the chat, and I will get to those as soon as I can. I'm going to, let's see here, got to change out of this just a second. Get my PowerPoint in the right spot. There we go. I'll share that. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to show you, of course, with digital design is basically all the benefits and all the products and all the services we can provide doing that, a lot of the differences in digital design versus pencil, although I would say it's an addition to pencil because pencil does not ever go away. Most of the work that we're doing is in the field. A lot of what we're doing is taking notes. And so the digital design and the tools that we use for that are basically a vehicle for communication and organizing information. So we'll talk a little bit about the digital environment, the design process, the file structure that we have put together. This is for United Designers, and basically it's just a very good system for pretty much anybody that's working digitally in order to keep your information straight. Especially with digital, we can integrate a lot of information from many sources and add that to our design, which makes it much easier to do, working with the layers. And in building our designs, all the different structures that we can use, anywhere from 1/4 acre to 160 acres, 50,000 acres, it really doesn't matter. Everything that we're doing is scaling up. And it really helps that the digital platforms that we have are allowing us the freedom to do that. Of course, with that freedom comes a lot of responsibility and also a lot of opportunity to make mistakes. And that's what we try to keep to a minimum. So talking a little bit about going digital, pencil and the digital process or the design process, basically everything always will start in pencil. I do my sketches that way. We do a lot of planning lists, especially you're working with clients, and all of that really starts in pencil, and then we communicate it on the computer. Solutions come from insight and experience. The computer doesn't make these things for you. We have to decide what it's going to do. As Einstein, I believe, said, or somebody said about computers, they're great at making answers, but they have no clue what the questions are. So we have to create those questions in our mind, come up with the answers, and use the computer to basically augment that. Our design process that I'm going to talk about can be applied to any platform. There are a lot of different digital packages that are out there to use. I prefer Illustrator, but I also use a number of other packages with that, and people that I work with also do use the various products in getting the work that we need done. And by the way, good practices are universally appreciated. There's personal preferences, and I've worked with this all my life in design at many different levels. People like things a certain way, and that's great, but good design is good design, and everybody can tell when something's bad and something's not working. And you may like the color purple or puce or whatever it might be, but good design basically communicates well, and that's what we're trying to do with our work. Also, the public these days, as you can imagine, consumes a huge amount of graphic design these days, and they can tell we are used to seeing good packaging, layouts on the internet, hopefully, but magazines, things like that, advertising, and we can tell good quality work when we see it, even though we may not know what it is. A lot of people can recognize it when it's done. We also go from patterns to details in all things. We're not starting with the species of plants and things like that. Just like the scale of permanence, when we're working digitally, we start with the big patterns, the big things that are on a base map, and then we work slowly as we add and go into detail in order to find our solutions. The computer does not correct bad ideas. It accepts them just as much as you're going to lay them in. The only thing a computer can really do is fix your grammar and your spelling, and that's if you ask it to. But bad ideas can go right into our designs as well as good ideas. It's up to us to know the difference and where to put things. And by the way, the computer can also take a lot of time. It's not creative, it's digital. Organic creation, as you're using a pencil, you'll get a lot more creativity out of using your pencil on paper than you will trying to make your computer do what you want with all the different limitations it has with circles and squares and all those kinds of things that are going to make it difficult, when really creativity comes from our sketches, and it comes from going through our notes and kind of building even polycultures by hand, and then using our computer to kind of clean them up and get them in. So as we observe and integrate, which is one of the main tenets of permaculture, there are a lot of types of elements that go into our design, things that we're trying to integrate. And we try to stay organized that way. On the lower right, what you see here is actually how things are layered in GIS software. When we're going online to GIS programs, people work in ArcMap, it's all in layers, just like Illustrator is, just like Photoshop is. So all that information is layered for us. When we are doing our data mining and finding that information, we also have to make sure that we keep those in layers so that we can use them that same way. On the upper right, you see basically that's our folder. That's our project folder for United Designers. All those folders are basically empty unless there's a template in there to help us organize the information. But this is how we stay organized, and that starts with the computer. A project folder full of empty folders, all with the different titles, and we'll add other folders to that at times too. But in order to stay organized, where we put our information makes it that much easier when we're doing our design work. This is a multi-layered environment that we're working in. All these layers affect each other. As you can imagine, topography ties in with the water flow and watersheds. Soil types change the plants. The aspect of the topography towards the sun changes the plants. All sorts of different things are going to be on these different layers. And the nice thing about working with these is that we can actually turn them on and off when they have a relationship, when we're trying to get them to show and help us decide what we're going to do. We can make those decisions, and then we can actually turn those layers off. We don't need to see the soil types after a certain while. Or we can screen back the topography to like 10%, maybe 15% of the density that it might be showing. So it's almost invisible in the background, but we can go look for it actually if we need it. The other thing that's great about digital is that it's vector software, which means it's using lines and calculations, not pixels. So it's not going to break up when we make it large. Our scale that we use in United Designers, and generally the people I work with, I've found is 1 inch is equal to 20 feet. And that's 1 to 250 in metric. That's our common scale that we like to design in. And the reason we do that is because all of our plant symbols, all of the things in our key, in our symbol libraries, our brushes, are all at 20 scale. And the nice thing about 20 scale is you can do pretty much any size design. And in our case, if you're doing 160 acres, that will fit within Adobe Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator actually has a 10 by 10 foot drawing board. If you can imagine doing that on your wall in pencil, you could have 20 scale. We can actually do it on our screen and zoom in and back out as much as we want to keep that 20 scale, and now also have all these symbols and things ready for us to use without any problem. And every time we do a project, we're adding more and more symbols to our symbol library as we go along. And that means everybody has access to that. And then we're also exponentially gaining more symbols as we work. And also increasing other things that aren't plants. Of course, we have cars in there and roof lines and things like that. So that helps a lot. We can rescale this also, by the way, even though it's a 20 scale, it might be huge, but we can rescale it then when we go to do our output. And then we give it a new scale. And I'll show that when we do the title block. So we're working in 20 scale. It might seem very large or very small. And even when you're working on a 1/4 acre lot, it's going to be a tiny little map that you'll have on your screen. But again, we're going to zoom into that so the scale is kind of irrelevant. And that works very well for us. The other thing that we do is we work in layers also in Adobe Illustrator. And you'll find these layers in other software programs too. So as you can see, with the kind of layers of information that we get, and the fact that we keep them organized in our folders, those basically reflect the folders, or I should say the layers that we're using in Adobe Illustrator in order to keep that information nice and organized. And by the way, this layered template is actually a blank drawing template that we have in Adobe Illustrator that already has all the layers on it. So when we open up our empty folder, basically it says empty folder, duplicate this. You duplicate that folder, put your project name on it, and then all these folders for keeping our information is already in there. And then in the design folder is the Adobe Illustrator file that already has all these layers on it. So when you go to put your information into this for the base map or for the design, you already have all these layers to remind you where to put things. Property lines, buildings, topography. And there's kind of important that the positions that they have also, so that some lines go underneath other lines too. And that just makes it really helpful to use. By the way, sometimes getting these things to scale, because we never know what scale they're going to be, can be difficult, or we're measuring things on Google Earth. We have a little chart that helps for that too. This is an Excel spreadsheet that I made actually when I was in the Netherlands doing a class there. Just basically decided, you know, we're doing all this math in our head. Let's just do a quick little chart. And this only has 2 fields that you put in, and then it tells you the percentage that you either need to enlarge or reduce to get to the scale that you want. And we're always at 1 to 250 or 1 to 20 is our scale. And we can just measure what the actual distance is, and it will tell us how many inches or how many centimeters long it should be on our design itself. So that's another quick way that we try to get tools together to help us do the design in a faster manner. So this is what we get when we're doing a multi-layered base map. This is an older one. And what you're seeing on this one is actually the soil map. So in this case, on this base map, I actually have all the different soils turned on. And on the left, you can see 2 callouts for the pH and organic material of the same thing for these soils. This really helps us when we're communicating to our client or even for ourselves, what's going to go on in this design and how are we going to use the information. Once we've kind of seen this, we see the pH on here and the soil types, then we can turn this off and we're back to a nice clean base map to start doing our design. By the way, this is an A1 paper, or this would be 24 by 36 in the US when we print these things out. These are basically that standard size, that standard scale. That's used in engineering and used in landscape architecture. So part of our goal also is to come as close to the standard format that other industries are using, so we can blend right into that work. It also raises our reputation and people understand that we know what we're doing because we're working within the bounds of their format too. So we do an output like this. At Office Max, it's like here, which is a print store, they're like $4 for a black and white, about $30 for a color, and laminated might be about 40 US. But once we have this made, this base map made, and it's all these layers in digital that I can turn on and off, I print this out, and then I take it to the client, and we sit down with grease pencils, crayons, whatever it might be, and we start to map out the functional spaces. So as soon as we have something in digital, what is the first thing we do? We output it into analog. Take it to the client, sit at a table, and talk about what are our opportunities, where things should go, and what is going to be our strategy for the design. Once that's done, we bring this back, and then we're back in digital again, working for taking those ideas and those solutions and bringing them back into the computer so we can kind of refine them and get them measured a little better. So this is another example of a base map. This is a recent one that Ben and I worked on for a farm. And this is, again, another example of a base map. We have a lot of their points of issues that they want to handle on here already listed, some of the features that they're liking. So we already have a lot of information from our client interview. And then we have the base map to scale for them. And then at this point, we print it out and we take it and we talk to them, or we send it to them as a PDF. Again, everything on this screen and on this map, by the way, is changeable, and it will change as we work. That's kind of the beauty of being digital. And it's very clean. The topography is on here, but what you don't see are a lot of the working layers that we use in order to get to this point, but they're just waiting in the background for us for when we need them. So there's a lot of other different ways, by the way, of using digital that's a benefit for us. Once you've kind of worked with Illustrator, once you're kind of making base maps and things, sooner or later, you're going to start using it for other things too. Now, what you see on the top is the polycultures. And we work with polycultures a lot. That's one of our main things in our tool belt when we're working ecologically. So these are, again, all made on Illustrator, all from our plant symbol library. And we're taking the plants and we're building a polyculture on the screen. And guess what? We can take that polyculture and we can turn that whole polyculture into a symbol also. So we store that in our library. So our library now has not only the individual plants, but it has the groups of plants that are already made, and we can use that. We have some from Thailand. Actually, these here are from the Integrated Forest Gardening book. I redrew these, getting these from Wayne and Bryce for the book, and added them in, and then added the titles for that. These become assets for design, just like any of them I've done in say in Spain or Costa Rica or anywhere like that. Once we make them, they become something that we can use. And not only that, we can actually use those in other designs, and they're already going to be ready and in scale for us to use next time. To the right of that, which you can also see is elevations. Now, these are a little more difficult to do, but they're actually quite a bit of fun. And once you've made a palm tree, or you've made a fruit tree or something like that, you can put that, and now we have that. We basically have our palm tree made. And if one person in United Designers is making a few of these, everybody has that as an asset. That's why we work in teams, and that's why it works quite well for us. And the lower left is another elevation type diagram showing the installation process. So even though in the upper right of that little picture, you'll kind of see the aerial picture, we're actually showing a cross section, showing where the trees go in, the angles of the ground, the swales and the berms and all those kinds of things as it goes in. It's another thing that we can do in Illustrator to kind of help put things together and explain things. The last one on the right is our typical finished design that, again, is rescaled for doing the title block. When you see these frames where my logo is on there and we have the black lines around it, that's actually the title block. And that is where we replace the artwork that we're working on, and we rescale it to fit that 24 by 36 or that A1 paper to go out. That's where we add all of our notes. And that's one notation I'll say about our class. When we're working on design, we're working on the artwork. We don't label things. We don't put text on there. Very little of that. Sometimes the symbols where the plants have it. But we wait until we have our design fairly close to being done or worked on. Then we import it into the title block, resize it to fit the standard format, and then we add all our labels. That makes it much easier. So if we need to change the design, we can go do that. If we need to change the labels, we work on the title block, and we don't have to go back into our design and start messing other things up. By the way, you'll see on the bottom of this our logos for Natural Capital and United Designers. Those, of course, are all done in Illustrator too. So basically, my point being is that even though we're using this for our design work, you're going to find that it's very useful for a lot of other things. Illustrator is a very, very powerful tool for communication. So the benefits of working digitally, I just have a few here to list for you. And we can go these rather quickly. But accessibility is big. Now, you might think that having things accessible to you on a computer means you got to turn it on, you got to open up the file, all of that, which is very much true. On the other hand, we can transmit our designs to anybody in the world, either as an Illustrator file or a PDF, basically within seconds, if not minutes, right? So everything we have that we're working on a computer, we can share with other people and we can get from them. So that kind of accessibility is pretty amazing. In analog, of course, it's a little harder. Maybe you got to scan and take a picture of it. But with digital, we actually can much easier work at teams. Now, we also have file organization, and I showed you a little bit about that in the previous slide. On the upper right here, you'll see our data mining program. This is our data sheets. When we're trying to get all of our information to do the base map and do the work, we actually have file organization for those things too. This is also in those folders. These are templates, and they're empty. And basically, when you start to work on a job, we have 8 to 12 pages of data sheets that need to be filled in before we know what we can do. And the key reason we do that is because if we don't know what to do, it's because we haven't asked enough questions. These sheets are the questions. This is what helps us understand what's going on. Once these are filled in, our insight comes through for our solutions. So exponential levels of detail keeps it on one file. I can have tons and tons of detail in this Illustrator file and all those different layers, and I just turn off the ones I don't want. I can have 4 or 5 different aerial images that I can use to help me with the design, maybe even from different years, and I can turn those off. So I can store a lot of things on there. Plat maps, engineering maps, survey maps. Maybe there's a water flow map I got from somewhere. I can size those in. All those things help me do the design work, but I can turn them all off when I don't need them. Also embedded in the design process to help us on these tasks are a lot of visual cues. That's what I'm saying about the layers in there, things that help us remember what we want to get done. As these things get layered together, we also get intuitive patterns. We can kind of see from the aerial where the wet areas are, the low areas are. The topography comes in and we can see those steep slopes. We can see which way they're facing. All this information starts to give us these patterns, and our insight starts to come in about, well, if this is this kind of condition over here, maybe I want to have these kind of solutions or these strategies to think about. So there's a lot of information that just comes from observation from all these different layers and how they integrate with each other. Designated layers of information, I showed you that in Illustrator. That also is very helpful. We have the folders to put it in and keep that information, especially when we work as teams. And then we have a place to put that in the Illustrator file itself so that everybody can see it, turn it on when we need it, turn it off when we don't. Existing templates and symbols. The plant symbols are ready to go. Even the key that we use in our design, we can use that key to emulate the kind of patterns that we want to use. So when I'm doing a road or I'm doing a water line, a sewer line, a fence line, things like that, you can click right on the key and your tool will turn into that. I can click on a fence line and I will draw a fence line. I can click on a road and my line will be that road symbol. So it's really nice to have that already in the file. And so those designated templates and symbols basically help us work a little faster, but it also helps us to be consistent. So our paths are always similar, except for maybe the width. A gravel road looks like the gravel that we always use, and we basically have our style that we're working with. We can import supporting data. I think I have something on here. Oh, by the way, here's some of our plants. You can see there's some elevation, lateral views of the plants, and other ones here that are the aerial view coming down. You can even see we have a couple cars in there. In the upper left corner, that's our standard hoop house, high tunnel. It can be resized and reshaped to any size that you want. And then that little roof line, you can take that roof line and match it, and you can create pretty much any shape of house that you might want. So these are the assets that we have that we use, and basically as we're working together, we just keep building these. By the way, as you'll notice, the initials on all of these symbols, these are the scientific name initials. The first two letters are the binomial, the two words in the scientific name. That's how we identify the plants. It's basically helping us also to learn the scientific names faster of the plants that we're using. And then you'll see also below that in white, kind of faded out, will be the common name. Depending on where we're working, the scientific name never changes. Those initials are actually standardized international initials that everybody uses for the symbol of the plant. And every kind of horticultural, agricultural, biological industry, when it comes to the species of the plant, that's what everybody's using. So it's a pretty good idea that we do that. The common name underneath, we'll go into the symbol library as we're finishing the job, and we'll put the common name in for what they call it in that region. So if you're in Senegal, you're going to call it Corosol for soursop. If you're in Costa Rica, it'd be soursop down there. If you're somewhere else, it might have a different name. So we have to make sure that we identify that in an international sense, but we also label them in a regional sense that everybody's on board with and can see what we have there going online. So we also share files with each other, the resources. Screen grabs are easy to take, especially with the Mac. With the PCs, of course, too, you can do screen grabs, which are fairly high resolution, and use those in your design also. Something you can incorporate too are PDFs of surveys. This is a survey that we're working on with another project. When somebody sends you a PDF of a survey of a property, you can bring that into Illustrator, and it will accept that as a vector file. All those lines on there will be lines that you can zoom in and you can change. If they send you a really good PDF, they'll even be in layers. I've had PDFs from clients come, I open them up in Illustrator, and all the buildings, all the roads are all on separate layers, which is absolutely beautiful. Those are also called DWG files. Those are the best type of files to get. But if you get a PDF file and it's flattened, we can work with that too. It's just a matter of going in and fixing the lines. But it's a great start to have that kind of a survey working for us and brings us that much faster. So experimentation, obviously much easier to change things on a digital file than it is with pencil. You can also do a lot of modifications later. Things change, clients change their minds. Something's gonna go, something can't be done, a pipeline is there. Maybe there's a utility line that wasn't known about. So a lot of times we have to change things. We can also make multiple versions. I've done this a lot of times for clients. Maybe we have one client that needs one kind of version and a client needs another. In this case, here we have the same map in two different ways. On the right, you basically have the installation map. This is our original design map. On the left, we have a map that's actually made. In this case, it was made for the board of directors of the nonprofit running this company or this organization, so they could understand what our functions are. They don't want to see all the detail. They don't need to see the drip irrigation. They just wanted to know what plants we're putting in and what areas of the farm we're using and how we're using them. Pretty simple to do that. We can go back, turn certain things on, turn other things off, and now we're back to whatever kind of map that we want to have. So it's really nice to have different outputs, different formats also. You can print this out in 8.5 by 11. You can send it as a PDF any way you want to do it. I also have to say it's a profound increase in professionalism when you do digital work and you stick to the standard formats that people are used to seeing. If you go into a city, if you're going into a municipality especially, we're looking for permits or things like that, whatever might be needed by the client, and they come in with a nice map that's already to scale, and it's basically in a format that the city engineer will recognize, we're much more professional and our reputation goes up just a little bit. We're also with Adobe Illustrator especially, we're in a community of like-minded designers. We're working in the same scale, and we can basically bounce things off each other. I can work with designers, they can work with me. I can see their files, open them up, they can open mine, and we can also work together on screen like we're doing right now with Zoom. And that helps a lot too, so that we can share those files. Commonly available and supported by other users, especially when you're doing Illustrator. Digital work, anybody who's working in digital, if it's on any of the different platforms, we usually can share that too. So I don't want to say that only Illustrator is what shares. I get information from all the other software programs also. Makes it a little bit different. You got to kind of massage them sometimes to get them to work, but really whatever platform people are working on is just fine for me. We're also standardizing our designs. As you can see from things that other people are doing too, you can kind of recognize when you're seeing an Illustrator file kind of as a standard that United Designers is kind of putting together, mostly because we're trying to raise that standard in permaculture and also get a common language. It makes it much easier for us to read each other's designs when we're using a common language, when you're using common symbology. When the organization of the information is similar, it makes it that much faster to communicate and starting trying to figure out, okay, what style is this person working, right? So we're raising the standards of permaculture and ecological design in general doing this. And the last thing I want to say, it has a higher perceived value. When you work in digital and you give somebody a nice printout, and it's not crazy color-wise, I'm saying, right? And you actually add some details to that and a lot more information, basically your billables go up and your confidence goes up, and the confidence in the client in you also goes up. And that's very important. We are basically selling them confidence for the most part in our design skills, that they can get it done. And when they see a nice design come through, that helps them relax and understand, oh, this is what it's going to be. And then they can read it and they can understand what they're going to do at the same time. So the last thing, or excuse me, one of the other things I want to talk about is there are increasing digital resources. The USDA soil maps, and Europe has soil maps. I saw them in the Netherlands, other countries also, in Spain. Every country has their different format, but the resources are there. And the fact that they're digitally available means that we can incorporate those into our design. And this is growing, as you can imagine, larger and larger and more available all the time. It used to be that you had to have some magic software, very expensive education to get a lot of this information, but it's becoming more and more available to us, and we can take that and integrate that into our designs. LiDAR and GIS technology is getting up there. LiDAR is extremely accurate. I know Ben Missimer has been working with that and working great, amazing kind of detail that he's getting out of these files, for the most part, aren't available to everybody, but he's really learned and cracked that open. So now we have that opportunity to use LiDAR all across the world, hopefully, as it comes available in different countries, but especially in the United States. Also, by the way, cheap drones. I have a Mavic Pro. I know a number of people have Phantoms and Mavic Pros. Doing our own drone work and then taking those DEM files, DEM files, and sending them off gives us, again, another resource for digital work that is very beneficial to us, and also real time. High resolution images done yesterday or last week that we can do in our design work, as opposed to something that would maybe is done 10 years ago, is not very sharp, and is also dated at the same time. Google Earth is getting better for this too. We actually do a lot of screen grabs in Google Earth and merge them together to make a very high resolution image for larger areas. And you can also add more graphical images like the one I have down here. This is actually from Gizmo. This is basically climate information for an area for the months of the year. A great way to just screen grab, it goes in the design. Bring it nice and big on the screen, do a screen grab on a Mac or a PC. Now we have information, which makes another layer, another notation. for us to do on the design. It's very helpful to have that information. When we're doing our sector maps, of course, that information is coming from calculations that we're getting online. This also is done in Adobe Illustrator. All these little artifacts, all these little notations are done in Adobe Illustrator so that we can change them and adjust them. We're now kind of building, and I have a library, all these different latitudes. As you can imagine, every latitude has its different sunrise and sunset angle for different times of the year, but every latitude is also at 44 degrees. It doesn't change, right? The different times of the year, the solstice or the winter equinox is actually going to be the same. So it's nice to start building that library of information too. Weather Spark, which is a great place for graphics for weather. Another thing, this right here, you can grab it right off the screen, and we can use that in our design work as information that can be shared with the client. Soil surveys. I'm laughing at my cat here, sorry. Soil surveys, I just wanted to show you a little bit about this. Very important for us to have so that we can work with our plants. If you can get on the USDA Soil Web Survey, great, or in your country, soil type, base material, the pH, of course, is very important for us to know so we can pick out our plants. And then the slope and the aspect, which is going to come from the topography, to understand where we're going to put them relative to the sun and sun angles. This is very helpful. When we're reading the soil maps, soil type, condition, and layers, we want to read those relationships. We get a lot of visual cues from this when you look at the ground as far as root types, things we're going to work with. Aerial images, topography comes off of these too. Chemical properties and limitations and vulnerabilities. All of these can come off of soil maps. Excuse me. So all of this is available to us, and incorporating this into our design work. This is the USDA Soil Web Survey where this information comes. You can go to this anytime. You can Google Soil Web Survey. And this is a huge amount of information. This is where I get my soil maps that I use in the layers for my design. If you can find any of these online in your country, in your region, it goes very well for us to incorporate those in the layers of our design in order to help us put the plants in. This is an information or some example of how we put them on an aerial, just basically putting in our different soil types and what the slope is and what kind of soils we have, which is very helpful. It tells us what kind of organic material we have. Another nice map to have, and it tells us the different percentages. A pH in this case, 6.2, 6.1. So that's very helpful. So we do the soil map, but we get all that information. What does that lead us to? Like say we have really acidic soils. Well, there are a lot of plants that don't mind acidic soil. So these are all acid tolerant annuals. We have acid tolerant shrubs. Another grade of information. This is all coming from the Natural Capital Plant Database. So once you find your information on the soil, once you do your soil tests, you can go on the plant database and start building your plant systems. Now, after the end of the webinar, I have a 48-hour free access to everybody for using the plant database. Your login is basically capital letters, Zoom with a space, webinar, and then the password is ZW123456, okay? That'll be 48 hours at the end of this webinar, and that's at permacultureplantdata.com. I want you to get a chance to go on there and play with that. It is the key tool that we use in order to have the insight to do the design work. Without the plant database, it'd be very difficult to do our design work. Without the Soil Web Survey and knowing what our soils are, it would also be difficult to do. So here's some polycultures that we've done. These are actually from Nick Tittle. He did these in Thailand, and we also modified those and used those in Illustrator, or in Costa Rica, excuse me. Oh, and by the way, when you get to the search page on here, which you'll see over here, you see these examples at the bottom of the page, look for that export button. And in the graphic, you can kind of see an Excel spreadsheet. Once you've done your searches, once you've found the plants that work for your soil, your pH, your growing zone, you can even select for nitrogen fixers, food, dynamic accumulators, whatever you want to do an export and get all those plants out into an Excel spreadsheet. That's what we store. That's how we build our polycultures, is from that Excel spreadsheet. Has the plants that we want, the size, the spread, and then their ecological functions, which is really important to us when we're doing our design work. Here's an example of the spreadsheet that comes off. You might have to do a little formatting to that, but in digital design, this information is analog, and then our brain is what translates it into what's going to be digital. We're thinking digitally how we can take these analog reams of information and create designs, create the solutions on the computer that we're working on. Now, a few different things about concerns that people might have about digital design. I just wanted to be honest with a couple things that go on with digital that kind of catch people. And I want to make sure that everybody has a fair amount of chance to think about this. At times, the levels of detail can be overwhelming. If you're working in pencil, that's great. But now you have the opportunity to bring in all this detail. That can be very overwhelming. The nice thing is that we have a list. We have a process sheet, 2 sides of all the different things in a chronological order of how you would want to bring them in your design. That way, one thing at a time. So you're not missing details you might need that later might trip you up. So there are overwhelming levels of detail depending upon the size and the complexity of the process. If you're working in rotational grazing with lots of different seasonal grasses, if you're working with animals and livestock, but you're also working in agriculture, there's a lot of integration in there. There's a lot of relative location that we need to think about. So staying organized with this information and using our layers helps us stay organized with that and keeps that detail under control. By the way, this is also why we work in teams. Data mining we do in teams. Sometimes we'll put it on a Google Doc, and we're all going and getting that data for this project to help fill it out. So then everybody knows what's going on. We know what the growing zone is. We know what the climate is, the soil types, all of that. So when we discuss the project, we're all understanding what we're working with. Some of the issues we have is lack of data, inaccessible information. Sometimes we're working, LiDAR isn't available. There's no topography. You'll go to an area and there hasn't been an aerial picture there for 20 years. And plus the one you get is blurry, right? That's the best time to kind of bring a drone in or something to do it yourself. At this point, then you're might have to go analog again. You have to ask questions. You have to find this information. So that wouldn't have been available with pencil either if you're going analog. But if you can find any information at all, sometimes you can extrapolate from that things that you can use in your design. So anything that's available will help us. But once in a while, when you get, especially in other countries, there might not be a lot of good information available. The nice thing about working in other countries is many times you can use your drone there, whereas here you could not. So a lot of that work can be done. Like if you're working in Africa and other areas in the tropics, you can use your drone and get all that detail and then come back with it and then build your own maps more than you could probably have found there. You do need a good computer to do this work. A laptop is fine and probably powerful enough to do it. If you're going to use the computer and you're going to be doing digital work, I really do recommend a large screen, 21-inch screen, 23-inch screen. People have even bigger screens. Eye fatigue is the biggest problem if you're staring at the screen all day trying to do this kind of work. Add-ons also to this, I use a digitizing pad. I use a Wacom tablet for all the work that I do. So those types of things help. External drives to double up your work. Actually, 2 external drives now, I was told. You also have to back up your work on 2 different drives because sooner or later, one of them will fail. So instead of buying one 4 terabyte drive, you buy 2 terabyte drives, 2 terabyte drives, and you double up because one of them will fail and then you won't have a problem. The learning curve and expertise comes through repetition, and it takes a while. The nice thing is it's just there waiting for you, and we have a lot of templates and a lot of things to help you. If you take the course with us, and I do really recommend that, you'll get a lot of mileage in those 5 days. And it's been proven in the courses I've done in the Netherlands and South Africa and here in the US, a lot of mileage in that 5 days because we have a lot of exercises, and you may even be working on your own design if you want. That will help you then understand what you're working with and work forward in your design work that much faster. Staying organized, I've already mentioned that a couple times. With digital, that's a concern. Knowing where your files are, that's just all about organization. By the way, adding colors, and as people who know me will understand, I have an issue with color, and I have an issue with how people use color. As you'll notice on my design and the way that I work, I kind of mimic the natural landscape. If I'm working in Senegal, there's lots of browns and dark tones. I try to stick with that. If I'm in the tropics, I'll stick with the tropical colors. I don't do blue trees. I don't do orange shrubs, right? There's no reason to have all these different colors. It's hard on the eyes. Yellow, reds are really tough. Bright blues are really hard and confusing as people are looking at designs. So we use earth tones. And in Illustrator, they have a a color tablet, a palette, that's just earth tones. It's called foliage. That's the place where I get all of my colors. It's very few to use, but it helps me keep simple. And color is very, very dangerous for people to use because it can just get crazy. And we really want to keep this simple and easy to read. All the graphic rules apply, by the way, just like in graphic design. People really want to know what the information is, but if something's out of sync and something's not right, they'll know. So color, simplicity, reducing visual noise, which is the least amount of graphics for the most amount of information. Really push things back. Make things disappear into the background. We do this with transparency. We'll make our topography, might be at 10%. It's still there, and you'll see it. As soon as you want to see it, you can look for it. Oh, there's the topography. It shows up. So there's a lot of things we kind of hide in the background so they don't kind of mess up our pattern and mess up our design work as we're working. Now, a little bit about design software. Pro Landscape, Dynascape, these are professional landscape software programs. Great to have, great to use, a little expensive, but if you're doing large work, but you're also doing professional work, I'm doing more of the commercial work, these can be very helpful. Pro Landscape cannot do a very large property. It might be 10 to 25 acres at most on that. They do the invoicing for you, they count the plants for you, but they only count the plants that they have in their library, and you'd have to make a bunch more. So these are actually kind of great for commercial landscape design, not really for ecological design like what we're doing. Adobe Illustrator, of course, which I've been talking about the whole time. People do take and use, I should say, they use AutoCAD, but they still take the class. So I want to be very clear about that. When we're teaching Adobe Illustrator here, we're teaching a design process with Adobe Illustrator. But people will come with Vectorworks, they'll come with AutoCAD, and they'll do their project on their software because they know how that works. So the design process that we're going to use can pretty much be used on any software program because it's a process. It's not dependent upon technology. It's not dependent on Adobe Illustrator or the computer to get it done. Even if we were working in pencil, you'd still use this process. And on the class we do with technical drawing before the Adobe Illustrator class, that's all in pencil, and that also uses the same process. Then it's just about pencil skills, and that's a whole different level of complexity to work with in pencil, and it's a different way of working. It's really good, though, to learn the design process in pencil and then start working in Adobe Illustrator or a digital program. Inkscape, I've heard about people working with that. I haven't worked with it myself, but I've seen it. And Affinity, which is basically the cheaper Illustrator. Now, Affinity can actually open the Illustrator files, and I've checked it out, and there are things that it can't do, right? Of course, I think it's $40 for a flat fee to buy it. Very similar to Adobe Illustrator, can open the files, but as I've seen some of the reviews, there's a lot of things that it can't do. But it might be a great way to start working with digital, going that way. And it doesn't matter what software program you want to use, it still will work with our design process here. Many of the tools in Affinity are the same as Adobe Illustrator. So if we're teaching Adobe, you might be able to use that when we're doing, and might have to translate a few things. Now, QGIS is a GIS software. It's open source. That's a whole nother level of complexity too, because that's GIS with GPS information, working with drones, those kinds of information, GIS data sets that you might get. I know people that have done design work on QGIS. It's highly complex, but again, if you know the software, that's great. Go nuts. You can make it work. But with that, it's very complex, just like AutoCAD. You have to already know the software because the learning curve is going to really disrupt your progress in doing the design that way. So the last one I'll talk about is Real Landscape Architect, and that's a 3D software I hear people are using. 3D is great, and it's coming. And by the way, working with digital is bringing us to that next stage. Sooner or later, you know, there's going to be augmented reality, augmented 3D design. We can already do 3D mapping with the drones. I worked in Portugal, and the owner had a Phantom, and he did a super high resolution 3D map of his property, and I could actually basically on my computer walk down the road and look up at the trees. Pretty amazing. Sooner or later, that's going to come along, and that's the next stage of our design, is that we're going to be doing it in 3D and walking through someday. But I think, of course, learning curve with all of that, a lot of details with that and complexity. The last thing I'll mention on this too, is that pencil is always first. Notebooks, drawing, circles, making notes, sketching things out, that's how you come up with your ideas. And it's much easier to have that in a little book, carry it with you, than have a tablet or a laptop and trying to work with that. A little notebook for all your notes and all your sketches and all your ideas is really, really golden. So a few digital design tools. And I actually wanted to see if we had any questions also from Olly, if he's on there. I'm just trying to find my chat window here. Here we go. All right. So Olly, are you still there? All right, well, I'll just keep coping here. So by the way, I have the chat window in, and if you have, oh, I see, you can't unmute, sorry about that. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat window, and Olly will see that. And trying to find him on here, I don't see him on here. Go up again. Oh. There we go. Sorry about that.
Cool. Yeah, no, we just had one earlier about the open source browser-based software that could do that. I think you kind of covered that a little bit with kind of Inkscape and yeah, and the other one. But yeah, we haven't had any others. So if anyone's got any that come up, just whack them in the chat box and we can put them through. Yeah, really good so far. Really enjoying it. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I'll leave mine open up here too. So I want to show you a couple case studies and examples of how we're working digitally with this design. The first one here is one that was done in Minnesota, and I think I might have to change screens. So I'll do that so we can see that. Here we go. So this is done in Adobe Illustrator, and this is an example of our little city lot. This is an urban lot in this way. What's nice about this is, as you can see, the aerial is on here. It's very simple. I have the dimensions on here. Topography is on here. This is all in layers. And you can see all the layers as they come up on the side here. If I open up the base map, you can see the water, the plants, buildings, topography, hardscapes, all that information. This is just like the one that I showed you earlier, because I start with a blank slate, a template, but all of the folders are already there, ready to be filled with information. And as I've done my base map, what I can do is if I turn off my my concept here and other things, I basically just have my base map. This is what I start with. We have a roof line, the gutters are on here, the deck, a little shed. Pretty straightforward, about as simple as you can get on this. And if you look at this aerial picture, by the way, that is something that I've screened back. So that is something that I put it about 20%. If it was full on, really bright, I'm going to move my thing out of the way here. It would be really dark, and it kind of gets in the way of seeing the things that we want to see. So this is actually quite bright and screened back so that my design actually comes off the front of this. Now the trees are here existing. Existing trees have a little plus sign in them. New trees and things have a dot in the center. Now what's great about working with this too is that I can move these things around. The original design is great. Going to the client, all of a sudden something changes. I can start moving these things around. Also, if we look over here, you can see our plant list, and we have all of the plants that we used in this design are on here, and some of the polycultures are on here too. And I can drag and drop, and these are basically, there's a shrub. Oh, that's comfrey on here. Bring another apple tree if I want to, right? All of these things I can just drag and drop on the screen. And what's also nice about this is that through the one of the windows called Document Information, it will also count the plants for you. So that took a while to figure out how to do that. But you can drag all these plants on here and then go back to your list, which will look more like something like this. And I can highlight each one of these, and then you can see the number on the right side. I kind of put that in But I can double click on this and I have it just add, I'll just say, you know, how many plants, how many times does this work on here? It'll tell me 13, 9, 12, and I add that to the list. So this is a smaller worker, and this is still at 20 scale, and I'll bring this into my design as I need it. This is another example. This is one that we did in Texas. I'll turn off this. Here we go. This is basically the base map in this situation. I'm gonna move this over to the side so you can see it. So again, all these are just circles, lines, and squares. That's what digital design is. This road is actually a very thick brown line. Same with here. These topographic lines, again, they came off of a file, but they're just a line, which keeps our file size down. Each one of these different things in here, this is actually a symbol. This plant, the grass is a square, and then each one of these trees are also a different kind of symbol. It's going to open up the layers here so you can see that again on the base map. There are all those same things that I'm working with on here. Now, as I work in the artwork, let's see here. Sorry. Oh, this is the original base map. I'm going to turn on a couple other things here. Start working with our design. Oops, there's one thing I don't need. Notes in the Plat map in here. Here we go. So this is something that they sent me. They're actually putting an addition on the house. So I was able to take that file from them, this PDF, layer it and size it to match my design. And now to scale, I can actually add the addition that they're putting on this property, which is pretty nice for them. They're just like, oh, by the way, we're adding this addition on. Here's what the architect did. I size it up, I bring it in, and then I'm able to basically add that to the property. I'm trying to figure out where that is on here. There we go. Anyway, this is the original aerial that we worked with on here. This is at full size, at 100%. So this is from the drone. Works very well. On the base map, we added to that all the topography and all the different information that we needed on that. We even added the sprinkler heads that are on here too. This is for their irrigation. They have all these standpipes throughout the property when they're doing irrigation. All of this is in a layer, and all of it's very helpful to work with on the design. So a couple other things I wanted to show you. Whoops, I want to show you on the Barrett one here. The fact is, when we're working on these and we're working with our plant list, sometimes we're going to bring in a lot of different plants at a time. So I'm going to zoom in down here next to the house. And I'm going to bring in this polyculture that you see over here into, whoops, get it in my right layer. I have to get on the top. Remember about layers and adding things? Here we go. If you don't bring it in the right layer, it'll be underneath and basically disappear. So this is a symbol. This is pistachio and apricot. This is already made. This was made, and I did this previously to where I'm going to put this. So this is a polyculture for this property. It's got the nitrogen fixers underneath. It has a number of different plants. And this is how I make it so I can move it around. Now, guess what? This polyculture's shape is not going to be the same everywhere I go. So I can go into this and break the symbol link, and I can create and move this around, excuse me, so that now all of these plants are individuals. I still have my polyculture, but I want to move them now to fit the shape that I'm working with. And so even though I'm moving all these plants around, my plant count hasn't changed, the polyculture still works, and all the plants still exist, just I would have them. So I can use the same polyculture all throughout the property, and all I want to do then is change the shape. I've used this polyculture 3 times or 4 times. I know how many plants are in it, and I can work with it that way. So it's kind of fun to work with these different software programs this way, because I have this huge library of symbols to use. Say I wanted to bring in, there's my eggmobile, or a chicken tractor, whatever that might be. It's still a 20 scale. Everything here is a 20 scale. So you can be assured that everything I bring off of here, even if I decide to park an RV on the front lawn, it's going to be to scale. And basically, it kind of helps too to have these things available. You can kind of check out and make sure that your scale is working well that way too. So any questions about that? I'm going to go back to the Illustrator program, or excuse me, to the PowerPoint. Here we go. All right, share. Okay, so we were in Abbott, was the one little house, and we saw the one in Texas there too. So these are two little case studies that I wanted to show you and how we're using that software. By the way, these programs that you see, all the software that you see and all the designs that I'm showing, these are all using Adobe Illustrator, all using the same symbol library, and you can kind of see there's a general pattern and a general style. This is what I'm trying to support in doing the design work. So all of these folders, all of these files, all of these symbols will be available in the class, and after the class, you'll be part of United Designers and part of our library system. So every time I'm working on a job, all of those new symbols, plants, things I haven't used before, go into the library. I know Pete Whitten has some too. He's working on a project. He's going to add those to the library. That's how it works, and that's how we keep growing these and working better. We also can compare, and we have all these different templates, and we're kind of using the same sort of style for color, and it really is helping us raise the standard of what we're trying to do. So this online course is the last week of July. That's when it starts, but it will be recorded and be live at the same time. So people who can't be there or might miss something, you can always go back and see the recordings and see what the assignments are. We'll also have file packets that are going out with all the different assignments and different exercises to do. Some of them are done with pencil. They'll just be getting a PDF and practicing with a pencil or markers. And then others are going to be done on screen. All of that will be supplied to you as we move forward at the project. So a little bit about the course. So we have 5 different modules that we're working on during the 5 days here at Southwoods. And these modules will also be broken down into tasks, into sections also. So you're not going to have a big 5-hour recording. We'll try to break that down in the snippets. So module 1 is basic tools, layers, and the software operation. We're building progressive skills here. So we're going to start with the tools, how to make a circle, how to make a square, how those things work together, and all the different things that we can do with those. And we're also going to be using the tools and how to develop the workspace. So we're going to go right from that menu, working the tools, to then broadening out, okay, now we have this workspace. How do we use those tools to create a map? And that would be our second module in there. Using the tools, what workspace do we have? Working with the digital map. We're going to practice making symbols, practice importing resource files, all those kinds of things. Really bringing in this information, because a lot of it is not made by us. We are incorporating this information into our design work. And then that second day, we're working on all those elements of a base map. We are ramping up this very fast. These are intense and packed classes. Very important to follow the status of how we work through these, and then we will do them again, and then we will do them again. Because being fast is what helps us to be professional, and also make sure that we keep our rate up. Right? We want to keep that hourly rate up by doing this well and doing it quickly and not wasting time. The module 3 is basically geo-standard color palettes, digital graphics, symbol libraries. Now working with all those libraries that we have our base map made. Now, what are these standards of color palettes that we're using? How are we using our own work to make it look good and make it look professional? Digital graphics that come in, and then also the symbol libraries, working with that. Then we're going to work with the key. How do we build the key and all those things that are required, say in an engineering design, right? A lot of the engineering designs that people see have a certain north arrow, a certain kind of key. We want to be as close to that as possible, but still use the ecological information and the ecological symbols for our communication, and not just the things that are standing for engineering or every faucet or something like that. So we'll build the key, and we actually use the key to help us do the drawing. Then we're going to go back to the plant lists. We have to go back to the natural capital plant database or whatever plant list you have, and we start building those polycultures, right? So we're back and forth to all these different places of information. Go to the plant database, get our list, pick out the plants we're going to use, build those polycultures, create that symbol to scale, put it in our library. Just practice with what those things are, make a number of polycultures, make the symbols that we might need that aren't existing in the library, put them in our own library, and now we're ready to go and start to drag and drop on our design. So callouts also are another thing. We might want to take pieces of our design and blow it up bigger somewhere else on the paper. We can do that. Sometimes we want to make the garden a little bit bigger, or there's another area that needs more detail on our title block or our big printout. So we're going to learn how to have the big map, but then we're also going to magnify other pieces that might need to be larger so that the client or a customer can see what's going on with that. All of these are supervised work sessions. I'm there, and there'll be a number of teacher's aides to help you in doing this work in the class. And of course, I'll always be available online for Zooms and things like that before and after the class to help people who are working online. Polyculture is very important, building those. Design report management, then this last day, some of the things we do is finishing up. Everything that we're doing in Illustrator, what's amazing about that, they're all components for our design report. Little pieces, every chicken coop, every garden, every path, everything you can imagine that you can break down in little pieces because we have to talk about them. We can export those into a Word document or whatever you're doing for word processing. We make an outline and we create our design report. It's great to have a map. It's great to have this beautiful design, but you still have to have a narrative or a report that explains what this is. Maybe you'll have a spreadsheet that has all the materials, what the size of the area, what the export is of this space, what the service it provides, all of that. So it's very important for us to not only do a good design, but also do a report that helps people understand better, because you're not going to be standing there all the time, obviously. So they have a report that tells them what's going on and a place to start. Then if they have more questions, of course, you can add that in or have, of course, conversations with your client. So these 5 modules are really helping us first build the tools, learn and build the skills, and then apply all those skills in doing the exact kind of work that we want to do. We're going to do a lot of different designs, a lot of different plant systems. We're going to do a lot of aerial imaging and convert those into base maps so that we can get good and fast at this. If you have your own place, if you have some really good aerials that you want to work of your own farm or a project, absolutely fine, bring it in. Everybody appreciates seeing other people's work. We have things that we can supply you with, which is absolutely fine too, and it's made for that. But if you have your own work, that's even better, because now you can have the context and you have the understanding of what you're trying to do with that and focus your learning on the kind of skills you need for the region that you're working. So that's a little bit about the design class. Here we go. Oops, sorry about that. A couple other things I just wanted to talk about that are very important to us. ATRA, which is the National Sustainable Agriculture Information Service. This is in the US. Great amount of information, but this information is international also. The plants that they have on here, the systems they have on here is a fantastic resource for strategies. Dave Jackie, I have to mention, he's coming out with another book on coppicing. I just had a nice discussion, online webinar with him last fall. Excellent book, can't wait to come out. His Edible Forest Gardens, still use that. I use them in my classes. Really great books. Plants for a Future, that's that other database, which is fine. Tons of information. We have all those plants, but a lot of the plants that we got don't have ecological functions, and until they do, we don't put them in our database yet. We have about 5,000 plants waiting to come out onto our database, but we don't have the ecological functions or human uses for them yet, so they're waiting for that. A natural capital plant database, USDA plant database, is also very good. Lots of PDFs, great information on propagation and planting. And then if you want to have fun, Google trap crops. That's a whole nother system of using certain plants to attract away insects, the pests, by having plants that they actually prefer. Trap crops is a whole nother science. It's also how to get these insects away and these herbivores away from your plants. So just a couple different resources that way. So happy to ask you now if you have any questions about this, how I can help you, and anything that maybe I wasn't clear about or other information that you'd like. We can open up to discussion. Just wondering how I turn that back on. How do I turn that back on? Here we go. All right. So anybody, I can unmute your audio if you have a question, or you can send it to chat to Olly, and we can kind of go from there. There we go. Now everybody's unmuted, hopefully. There we go. Okay. Unless you have yourself muted. With that.
Cool. There's a few that have come up in the chat here, just as you were going. We had a question from Brian, who was asking if the Natural Capital Plant Database has a library of trees, shrubs, etc., figures to be included in and incorporated into the Illustrator. To the Natural Capital Plant Database incorporates, integrates into Illustrator. So
everything that we have as a symbol in our Illustrator library came from Natural Capital. There are 2,300 plants on Natural Capital right now. We only have about 350 as symbols in our library. Mostly because those are the ones that we use in our design work for most part, but there are a lot more in there than we actually have symbols for. Now, on the other hand, we have a template. We have all these things kind of thought out, hopefully. We actually have a template where you can go on and it's already there. The plant symbol is sized. It says this is the spread. All you have to do is drag it over, name it what you want, and drag it into the symbol library, and now we have another plant. So we basically have an an Illustrator file where we keep all of those plants. And basically that's how we make new symbols. And then if I actually make symbols on a design I'm working, I will cut and paste those into that library so that now if anybody downloads the library, they have them too. So there's no direct connection from the plant database to the Illustrator files. It'd be nice if there was. I actually, at one point I took an Excel spreadsheet, and if you do the bubbles chart, it will actually make all those plants into little green bubbles, which was great. But I couldn't go to the next step. I couldn't figure out how to get it out of a PDF and then make it into those symbols automatically. I was looking for a fast way to do that too. But generally speaking, we have so many in there now, we just drag and drop and then use one that we don't have. I didn't mute you. There you go.
There we go, back on again. Cool, sorry about that. When I mute myself, it says I can't do it again. So the other one was from Wildcraft. Let me just find it. And Wildcraft asks, can you explain how to get the plant count in a little more detail? Now, I seem to remember you having a video that you've uploaded recently on that onto the computer assisted group. So perhaps, what's the question? It was, can you explain how to get the plant count in a little more?
Oh, sure. Right. So by the way, just as Olly was saying, on my YouTube channel, I do little videos all the time when somebody asks me a question. Oh, I'll just do a video of that and record it. So I could show it. We can do that really quickly, and I'll share that screen with you right now. So if I have this, this file open, let's see, I have to move some things out of the way here. So I'm going to change my file list to a small list like this. I have borage in here. Let's say I have desert lime in my design, okay? What I'll do is go up here and say, select all instances, all right? Now, if I back out and things aren't locked, which sometimes they are, it will basically, I'm gonna go and unlock all of these too, because it can't count them if it's locked up. Oh, and well, sorry. It also can't count them if it can't see them. So the thing that you go into Window and go to Document Information, you get this little window in the front. Up here, click on Objects. And it will basically then count for you and tell you how many things are actually selected. So if I go back to my symbols and I say select all instances, let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to go back to where am I? Go to Abbott. Might be a little easier. Here we go. I can select this one. I have to make sure my layers are unlocked. I go into symbols. I have now I have Alpine Strawberry selected. Select all instances. And here it says 4. So I have 4 instances of Alpine Strawberry. Now in this case, if I actually open this up and you could see it, I'll zoom in. That is a group of them. You know, one Alpine Strawberry is kind of tiny. So I have 7 of these, right? Yeah, I have 7 in a group in this case to work with this. So I will basically highlight the symbol, select all instances, and then this symbol instance will tell me 6. And I'll go through each one of these. Select a plant, here's raspberries, I'll do that. Select all instances, and it says 14. So that's how it counts them for you. There was also an add-on, a plugin that you could get that would do it also, but found this was much simpler, even though they have a couple more steps to do it. This is about the best way to do it. And then you'll see in here, then I go and I write 14 to remind me. So I only have to do that once at the end, and then I put that number in here. And by the way, since Jessica asked, what I also did recently, my biggest thing was, how do you can't get this symbol list out of Illustrator. You know, it's like, that would be nice. Thank you, Adobe. So I did a screen grab of this list, brought it into PDF, made it a PDF in Acrobat, and did character recognition. And it turned it all into words for me. So then I could cut and paste it right into my design. And that's on my, video is on my YouTube's there. So I can actually take this list, take a picture of it, turn it into text. And now I can use that plant list on my design. So that was a nice way, another workaround for doing that. So with the plant list. So that's how we're counting the plants.
Cool. Another question from Alexius is, are the plant/element symbols set to base scale? If you change your scale, do you need to rescale the symbols?
Yes. If you change it, if you're not working in 20 scale, you'll have to bring them all on and change them all to a different scale. The nice thing is there is no reason not to work in 20 scale, because I think I have it. I don't know if I have it on here, but I'll see. I could open up one of these files here. So here is the Barrett base map. So there are 2 different files that I'm working on. This is the title block. Okay, oops, sorry, turn that back off. Can you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is the title block. As you see, the scale is 1 to 30, because in order to fit this on the paper that I wanted to, I had to reduce the size of this by, let's say, 75% or something, right? Actually, it's probably 66 in order to fit it. My actual design work, which is this one, right, now with a bunch of stuff turned on, this is my artwork layer. This is in 20 scale. That way I can always work in 20 scale, use all the symbols that I want, and then when I get ready with my design to put it out, then I place that artwork on here and resize it to fit the paper. then I can very easily calculate what my new scale is. So the point being, and we did this for a long time, we kept having to rescale all the symbols every time. And it really is a waste of time to do that. The best thing to do is use an artboard, an artwork layer or file. Do all your work in 20 scale or whatever scale, but that's what all of our stuff is in, on a standard scale. So you always have all your elements at the same size. Then place that on a new file like this title block and resize it to fit the paper. Then, like I was saying, we add all our text, add our labels to that, which keeps it much easier to work with on the design. So I hope that helps. You can change the scale any way that you want. It's just that we found this is the fastest way to go, is to have that standard one.
And there's if I'm right in understanding, there's a calculator as well that can work out the.
Yeah, like I kind of showed in the PowerPoint there. We actually have a little spreadsheet that you can open up quickly, and you put in what was the old size, what's my new size, and it will tell you what the scale is. So in this case, I went from 1 to 20 to 1 to 30. I actually had to reduce it basically by 2/3, or I don't think it'd be 50% because that would be 1 to 40. So it was like by 75% or 66% to get it down to that size to fit the paper. And when you're doing that, by the way, that scale needs to be something reasonable, not like 1 to 23.6. So we kind of put in what scale I want it to be that's reasonable. It will tell me the size, and I can resize my design to fit to that scale. So that little calculator works that way. But we'll do this a number of times, and that is our workaround in order to use our same symbols at the same time. What you have then, and what is a benefit, is you have two files. You have the artwork file that you work on to do your design. This has, you can see the soil maps are on here now. I've got everything turned on here that I would otherwise turn off, right? So this is my design layer, and that's a very large file. And then I place that in here when I'm done with it at whatever time I want, and it's placed. And by the way, I can go back to the other file and make changes, and it will automatically update this one. So these are linked together. If I want to go back and move something on here, I can do that. I'll save it. This will automatically update to that, which makes it pretty sweet.
Cool. So Global Earth Repair made a couple of points. There's one earlier that I forgot to mention. It was just an important note. SSD, the hard drives, aren't great backup because internal batteries might fail. Also, magnetics such as mechanical EMF might cause them to, speakers monitors might cause them to kind of crash. So I guess a kind of solution to that could be like cloud-based additions, you know, perhaps as well as alternatives, but perhaps looking at cloud-based. Right. And
yeah, go ahead.
No,
well, I'll just say that on one of the slides there, I had Dropbox and I had the cloud and Google Docs. We do a lot of, we do all that online. We share it on the cloud or in Dropbox, and that's pretty much backed up. And I did hear too, solid state drives are not trustworthy. I've heard that also. They're very expensive, not trustworthy. Old hard drives are better, and then have 2 of them. So what you don't see behind my monitor is my little stack of hard drives that I plug in and I back things up every couple weeks to do that. On the other hand, Val has her sound on. Okay, I just shut up. Anyway, so you save it, and at multiple times of saving this. But when it's on Dropbox, and I do pay the extra amount for Dropbox every year, so that I just store all of my design work, especially, is on that. There is very little that's on my computer anymore that's not on Dropbox. You know, it really is a place to just do the work. And what's nice about that too is there are so many different people I'm working with. I can share all those folders with the client. They have their access folder. And by the way, when we're working in these folders, when I'm working with as a team, everybody I'm working with has access to my work and my folders because we're working together. But the client only has access to their folder, which is where we put stuff that they can see and they can go look at. That way it's not a bunch of, because we have tons of stuff in there, and we don't want to have any problems with that. They get the PDFs, they get the design reports, just to keep it simple and not flood them with all sorts of other things.
Cool. Another question from Global Earth Repair is there already a design software that's specifically geared for permaculture or the ecological design process?
No. I would say it's like we say about, buy some land, live where you want to be and make it what you want it to be. Ecologically speaking, we can make things what they want. I would say the closest thing to this for permaculture is Illustrator, and that's only because it's being populated by us. And that's the tools that we have, the symbols that we have, all those kinds of things, and the examples that we have in our design work is what makes it the permaculture design. Otherwise, there's nothing, like I was saying, no program is going to put swales and berms for you and calculate the slope and your soil type and what width they should be and how long they should be, all those kinds of things. Nothing will do that for you. And people are trying to do that, but like I told the people from Microsoft, there's too many variables for a computer to do this. This is an art. This is an ecological art. And you have to understand the science and all the different things coming in to understand when something should happen, when it shouldn't happen, and then to what degree, if you do that, how it's going to work. So I think if you're looking for a software program that's working with permaculture, work with a bunch of permaculture designers that are using the same software. Whether it's Inkscape, Affinity, whatever it is, if you're working with other people that are using that software, that's what's going to work for you. Because then you can share, which is basically what we're doing. We're basically crowd sharing all of the assets that we're building.
Cool. And just a link for anyone who's listening that Global Earth Repairs has put a list of some other open source programs that might be available online. Val was asking if she's already a member of the Plant database, would the membership reduce the class cost?
No.
That's the thing that came up.
Sorry.
Brandon was asking about class details. Brandon, if you go back to the event link on Facebook for this, or go to halsey1.com, you'll be able to see more information about the course. Also, just go back to the Facebook link about the digital design course. You'll be able to see information. We can post a link on that after this course.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just see. Rakesh B was just talking about SketchUp. With SketchUp, you can write a Ruby script to rescale all plant models. When I was into programming, he made a script to take all the trees he wanted for a design, and it would create an image for each plant. And just the other thing with Brian came back and said, so how do I just get the symbols to incorporate into Illustrator? Now that's to do with the symbols library, right? So how does we get the symbols to incorporate into Illustrator?
If you go to the Natural Capital Plant database in the membership levels, the top level, which is the professional level, we have the individual, which is $30 a year, the designer, which is $50 a year, which allows you to export into Excel spreadsheets. And then we have the professional level, which I think is $179, something like that. And that includes the symbol library from the from the United Designers. Basically, that's all it includes in that. But there's other files in there too. So basically, once somebody starts using that symbol library, which I think is great, if you already know how to use those and you're already working with Illustrator, we're hoping that you'll join us and share your work, and we share our work with you. And we have, I think there's probably about 9 people now that have done that. And so, I know who they are, obviously, and I'm working with them, and we're basically sharing these symbols and sharing them with each other. And that file actually changes too. So downloading that at different times will give you more and more files. I have to be honest, we had somebody that corrupted our file, and it only took once, and now you can't actually edit it. We had to stop people being able to edit it. Of course, the more people you get, the more likely that's going to happen. So, but you can see them all, and then you just have to download that. And if you want a newer version, just download the new version, the new file.
Great. I don't know if anyone else has got any other questions that they want to open up. Now's a good time.
Well, good. Well, I'll hang out here for a while, and I really appreciate everybody joining us here for this webinar. I hope that was kind of helpful talking about digital design. And if you have any questions about the classes, Adobe Illustrator, design in general, design process, let me know. Very happy to talk to you at any time. And thank you, Olly. Olly's the man. Olly helped me put this all together, so I really have to give a shout out to him. He's been extremely valuable and very helpful in putting this all together today. So really appreciate that, Olly.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Pleasure.
And where are you? What did you introduce your company and yourself?
Yeah, just I'm over in on the border of North Wales and England, in Shropshire, and we've got earthrepairs.com, which is a ecological design company, just kind of starting out. You know, we've collaborating with two other designers, Olly and Kat, who are here on site as well. So we're just kind of starting out doing design, installation, maintenance. Been working with several different softwares, which is kind of what brought me to your work, because I'd looked at, I think initially I was looking at Vectorworks and looked at SketchUp and looked at Real-Time Landscape Architect, and I did designs in each one, and I was like, this is just not quite, you know, it's not quite fiddly and very detailed, and after looking through your systemized approach, I was like, yeah, this makes sense. This makes a lot of sense, and how it's all broken down.
Mm-hmm. And
it's, yeah, so I'm just really grateful to be here, learning from you, and excited to do more designs. You know, I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of going through the process. You know, it's been a lot of theory for a long time, so actually making it, applying it, and going through the processes, it's really rewarding. It's really good. Yeah.
Well, there's enough of us now that have been doing it. Tara has been there, and Jessica, Ben has worked on it too, and I don't know who else is in the chat here, but there's enough of us now that are working on it that we're constantly finding ways to streamline it, but also the process itself that we're using to stay organized and get our work together is what's really been helpful. Like I say, it's aside from working in Illustrator, it's just a good business practice and good design process that we put together. So that's all, of course, part of the course, whether you take the pencil class or whether you take that and then digital Illustrator, it's all the same. And that's, I would say, 50% of doing the design is understanding the process, you know, how it works, and then being able to stick with that. So let's see it. Okay, yeah. There's somebody, there's people in chat just saying some things. So I'm going to turn off this recording now. Thank you all very much. And I'll be here for a few minutes if you have any questions. Thank you, Olly.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Daniel.